Okay, well, hello, everybody. Welcome to TESOL 2250. This is week 9, day 1. So we have a lot to cover this week, and we may or may not get through all of it. And if we don't, that's okay. We'll probably do the rest of it in week 10. So just know that when we get to week 10, you may have to go back to week 9 and refer to this video or some of the class slides. So we're going to be exploring noun phrases a little bit more. We're going to talk about the distinction between proper and common nouns. And then we're going to look at a lot of the determiners. In fact, we're going to look at about 5 or 6 different types of determiners, both on the video and in class. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how we classify nouns. So remember that noun distinction, the most important one that we're going to use is the distinction between a common noun and a proper noun. So, for example, if I'm talking about the Pope, in general, any Pope, then this instance is going to be an example of a common noun. The Pope is not specifically named. If, however, I talk about Pope Francis, well, now this is a proper noun. This is the name of a person. So proper nouns can be names of people, names of places, anything that's capitalized and refers to one single individual or one single entity is going to be considered a proper noun. Now, we can also classify nouns by whether they're concrete or abstract. So, for example, teacher. This noun is concrete. It's something that we can see. In general, we can talk to a teacher and see them in front of us. Something we can touch is generally considered a concrete noun. In contrast, we have abstract nouns. These are things that we can't really see, feel, or touch, but they might be concepts, for example, like pedagogy. We can also divide nouns by whether they're countable, or what we call count nouns, or non-count nouns, or collective nouns. So, for example, bottle, like the one I have here, this is a count noun because I can have one bottle or 2 bottles. I can count them. In contrast, what's in my bottle is water, and water is what we call a non-count noun because we wouldn't normally say I have 1 water or 2 waters, right? So water is a mass, something that we cannot count individually. Now, we also have collective nouns like the word collective, that is a noun, or team, or group. Now, these are singular nouns, but they refer to more than one individual. Now, all of these ways are ways we could classify our nouns on our sentence diagrams, but we're really just going to focus only on the common and proper noun distinction. Those are the only things that we're going to label on our tree diagrams. We're not going to label whether it's concrete or abstract or count or non-count or collective, any of those things, okay? Because that's going to get a little bit too complicated. So we're just going to label proper nouns when we see them. And if it's a common noun, we're just going to write N for the rest of those. Okay, so let's look at proper nouns versus common nouns. Now, proper nouns refer to unique people, places, and things. In other words, a set of just one individual. So these often are with the word the before them, but sometimes they're not. And we're going to diagram them differently depending on whether a proper noun includes the word the in the title itself, or whether the is separate from it, okay? So we'll start at the bottom here. Let's just look at this one, the Statue of Liberty. Now we know that the is definitely part of the title, the Statue of Liberty. It's never called Statue of Liberty. It's always called the Statue of Liberty. So on our trees, what we're going to do is we're going to label that as one unit. We're not going to consider the as a separate determiner in our tree diagrams. We're not going to analyze it that way. We're just going to label that as one chunk. Now, if that's a proper noun, that refers to one particular individual, one particular entity. A common noun would be statue. There are many statues all over the place. That's just considered a common noun. Moving up, We continue with war and peace. Now, as a proper noun, it refers to one particular novel. Book is a common noun. Southern Utah University, obviously a proper noun, it refers to one particular place, but university is a common noun that can be any university. Biden would be a proper noun. President is just a common noun. Cheerios, proper noun. Cereal, a common noun. God, proper noun. Divine being, well, that's a common noun or noun phrase in this case. So again, we're only going to make the distinction between the proper noun and regular nouns on our tree. So if you see a proper noun, you're going to write it as prop N. Sounds like a proposition. You're going to write it as prop N. Okay, so now we get to determiners, and this gets a little bit confusing because we have a lot of different types of determiners. The main types of determiners that you see here are 5 types: definite and indefinite articles, possessive pronouns, demonstratives, numbers, and prearticles. So I'm going to go over all of these. We may not get to all of them in class, but we'll get to as many as we can. Okay, so let's look at determiners. So you remember our noun phrase rule. We get a noun phrase when we have at least a noun plus an optional determiner. So determiners are words that help specify something about a noun. So, for example, those birds over there, as opposed to some other birds. My neighbors, as opposed to some other neighbors. Each problem, as opposed to all problems. So again, what determiners do is they determine the scope of reference of the noun. So if I'm thinking about birds, I can imagine the set of all birds in the universe. And if I'm talking about those birds, I'm picking out a select group from the set of all birds in the universe, right? Same thing with my neighbors. Now that one's a possessive. It's a different type of determiner. It gives us a little bit different information, but I'm looking at the set of all neighbors in the universe. And when I use my, I'm picking out a particular set, i.e. the ones that belong to me. Now, if I say each problem, again, I'm thinking about the set of problems, all problems in the universe. And when I use the word each, it picks out a particular one individually from all problems. So that's what determiners do. They determine the scope of reference of the noun. So they specify something about the noun, and a lot of times people get them confused with adjectives. They look really similar to adjectives, right? Both adjectives and determiners specify something about the noun, and they also make constituents with nouns, but there is a key difference between determiners and adjectives. And that is that adjectives are open class content words. They specify a characteristic about the noun. Whereas determiners are closed class and they're function words. They just specify the scope of reference of the noun. So that's the difference, right? In adjective, we can add more, a lot of different adjectives. Words can mean a lot of different specifying characteristics, and they're telling you something more specific and more content related about the noun. Whereas determiners, again, are much harder to define. And they're more about picking out members in a total class. So let's look at now definite and indefinite articles. So this is our first group of determiners, definite and indefinite articles. So with articles, we have 2 types. We have definite and indefinite. Now, indefinite articles, these are a and in some phonological contexts, an. Now, a and an mean the same thing. We just use an in front of words that begin with a vowel because we don't say a apple, we say an apple, but it means the same thing as in a table. So these are indefinite articles. And then we also have definite articles. These, there's only one definite article and it's the. So The idea with definite articles is that they express shared information. So information that is shared between both the speaker and the listener. Indefinite articles do not indicate shared information. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of that. Now, let's say, you're inviting a friend over to a dinner party that you're having at your house. And you say, would you bring the chair with you to the dinner party? Now, if I use the chair, this indicates that both I, as the speaker, and the listener, who I'm talking to, both know which chair is being referred to. In other words, there's one specific chair, both I and the listener know it, and that's the one I'm referring to. However, if I say, would you bring a chair with you to the dinner party? If I use a chair, I'm saying any chair you want. I don't really have any idea of which chair you have. So it's not shared information. And that's the difference between the definite and the indefinite articles. Definite article is for shared information between the speaker and the listener, or reader and writer. Indefinite articles are going to be used for when the information is not shared between the speaker and the listener. Okay, so we're going to be doing a lot of practice trees. Here are some of them that are going to practice definite and indefinite articles, as well as proper and common nouns. So you can take a look at these example sentences. I put them in our module as well, too. And try to diagram them as much as you can. If there's a space where you're not really quite so sure, just leave a blank, and we'll add the determiners a little bit later. Okay, so now let's talk about possessive pronouns. Now, possessive pronouns, metaphorically or literally, possess the noun that follows them. So we have possessive pronouns that are determiners. This is our next type of determiner. And these are things like my or our, like my jacket, our house. In this case, I possess a jacket. And more specifically, if I say our house, well, me and somebody else possesses a house, metaphorically. You can use your and your car. Now, your can refer to, of course, singular or plural, second person. And then we have his, her, its, no apostrophe, and their. So his jacket, their house, or the cat is chasing its tail. Now here, notice the its has no apostrophe. It's the only possessive that does not use an apostrophe S in this case. If we use the apostrophe, then we are saying the cat is chasing it is tail. So that's a contraction instead. Okay, so these possessive pronouns on the left column here are all determiners. Now, I don't want you to confuse that with independent possessive pronouns. These on the right column are not determiners. They don't make phrases with nouns like a determiner does, which we see here in the right-hand column, my jacket, our house, etc. So independent possessive pronouns, they function as a noun themselves. They don't make phrases with nouns. So I can say, for example, this jacket is mine, or that house is ours. Now, mine and ours, you'll notice that they occur after the verb be, and we consider these to be nouns themselves. They are not determiners because there's no noun that follows them. Same thing with that car is yours. There's no noun that follows yours, so yours is the noun itself. My house is in Pine Valley. Hers, or his, or theirs is in El Cajon. Okay, so here again we see the independent possessive pronoun, and this time it's in the subject position of the sentence. But we know subjects can only be nouns and noun phrases. So his or hers or theirs has to be it has to be a noun phrase. So you can practice diagramming this sentence to the best of your ability for possessive pronouns. My house is yours. Now, in this case, remember that you're going to have one possessive pronoun that is a determiner and another one that stands alone and is a noun phrase itself. Okay, so our next category, the third category of determiners, is demonstratives. And very much like articles, demonstratives are determiners that indicate shared information between speakers and listeners. But with demonstratives, we're focusing on what is in or outside of the speaker's area of control. Now, this can be a literal area of control or a metaphorical area of control. So, for example, if I'm talking about this computer is not working. Well, in this case, this computer refers to my computer, and it's one that's in my area of control. I'm typing on it. You, as the listeners, you're far away from this computer, so you would not refer to it as this computer. You would refer to it as that computer, for example. I can also say these books. If I don't have any books right next to me, but if I had some books on my desk, these books, these are in my area of control. Now, my phone is sitting pretty far away from me, so I got to refer to it as that phone. It's over there in the chair, a little ways from me. So now you'll notice that instead of saying this, I'm going to say that. It's no longer in my area of control. It's far behind me. And similarly, I can talk about those cabinets or that bookshelf behind me. And in this case, it's out of my area of control. And so I'm going to use that or those for plural. Now, all of these words, this, these, that, and those, these are all demonstratives. So demonstratives demonstrate something called deixis, and this is the grammatical concept of pointing. In fact, often when we use a demonstrative like this or that, we often have to point when we're referring to it. So the words this, that, these, and those, they change depending on the context around us. So they don't have any inherent meaning on their own unless they're situated in some kind of context. Now, the context can be the physical context around me, or it can also be, for example, the sentence context, what I was talking about before. And we're going to see an example of that here in a minute. So again, just to repeat, this and these are a thing or things that are within the speaker's area of control. That or those are things that are outside of the speaker's area of control, singular and plural, respectively. So let's just think about this for a minute, and then I'll ask you guys again this question when we come to class. But let's imagine person A walks into the room wearing new shoes and walks up to person B. Now, person B can say either number one or number two. I like these shoes, or I like those shoes. Now, which one is person B going to say? Similarly, okay, person A and person B are talking. A says, let's get yellow curtains. Let's get yellow curtains. Now, person B can respond with, I like that idea. Or, I like this idea. Think about it for a minute. Which one would B respond to? Okay, so let's go back to the first example. Person A walks in wearing new shoes. Now, person B is going to most likely say, hey, I like those shoes. Why? Well, think about demonstratives as control. Now, person B is not wearing the shoes. So the shoes are outside of person B's area of control. They're in person A's area of control. And so by saying, I like those shoes, person B is indicating that those are not in their area of control. And this is actually a very common error that English as a second language students make. they might select instead number 1. I like these shoes, and it might be a little bit challenging. So if we're teaching English as a second language to non-native English speakers, this is something that we have to be aware of. We have to explain these and those as being in or outside of the area of the speaker's control, respectively. Now, the same thing happens with let's get yellow curtains. Now, would you say, I like that idea, or I like this idea? Once again, most of you are probably going to think, well, I'm going to say number 1. I like that idea, not this idea. Because if I said this idea, then it would make it sound like person B was the one that had the idea, not person A. So again, in this case, person A was the one who came up with the idea, so they are metaphorically in control of that idea. And so person B has to use that and not this. So when we think about, what is area of control, like I said, it can be the physical context, it can also be the mental context, or it can also be the sentence context, right? So if I'm talking about, getting a new car or something like that, and I'm referring to this new car over and over and over again, this is part of the sentence context that I'm building up as a speaker. And you might say, oh, that's a terrible idea, or that is a great idea. Again, I've already built up the sentence context for you, but it's still under my control. So let me just go back for a minute. In these sentences, I like these shoes, or I like that idea. I want you to notice that these, that, and those, and this, they're all demonstrative determiners. They're all determiners. What makes a determiner is that it comes before a noun. And in all of these instances, we all see a noun or a noun phrase immediately following it. Note there can be an intervening adjective or two, or maybe more. But the key is here that these make constituents with nouns and noun phrases. So we have a demonstrative determiner, but we also have a standalone demonstrative, just like we saw with the possessive pronouns. So let's say, for example, you said, let's get yellow curtains. And I said, oh, I like that. Instead of, I like that idea. Now you might say, well, idea is kind of implied there, but I can use that phrase for anything. If I'm at a store and, I see something I like, I could say, oh, I like that. Now, in this case, this is a demonstrative pronoun that functions as a noun phrase itself, specifically a noun phrase direct object. So on our tree, we're going to label this as dem pro, okay, demonstrative pronoun. We'll see a little bit of a difference. The previous examples, we're just going to label as dem, D-E-M. But here, a demonstrative pronoun, we need to put that pronoun in there because pronouns always take the noun phrase slot in a sentence. So we're going to label that as a noun phrase. And this particular noun phrase is a direct object because it comes after the verb like. I like that. Now, again, here we've got no other noun following it, so it has to be the noun. So you can practice diagramming as best you can. I like that idea versus I like that. And we'll do this in class as well, too. Okay, so let's talk about our next category of determiners. This is number 4. These are numbers. So numbers are determiners when they precede nouns, when they come before nouns. So let's say 10 giraffes. Now that's considered a determiner. Or mom's first balloon trip, also a determiner. Now this is a particularly different number. The first example is what we call a cardinal number. So cardinal numbers, just remember cardinal starts with a C and count starts with a C. So these are numbers, counting numbers. 1, 2, 3, 10, 20, 100 billion. These are numbers that we count. They're called cardinal numbers. In the second example, we have something called an ordinal number. And these are things like first and next and last, etc. So we'll often see ordinal numbers after articles or possessive pronouns, like his third date or the next explosion. Next is an ordinal number as well too. So once again, just like we saw with the possessive pronouns, just like we saw with demonstratives, if you have a noun that just stands alone, this is going to be analyzed as the noun. If you have a number that just stands alone, this is going to be analyzed as the noun itself. If you have a number and then a noun after it, then the number is going to be analyzed as a determiner. So here, let's take a look at this example. My granddad will be 76 next week. So numbers that don't precede nouns, they're considered nouns themselves. And for a challenge, you can try to diagram this sentence. It's one of the practice sentences. And we'll see what you come up with here. But notice that be is followed by 76. He will be what? He will be something. So that something tells me that this has got to be a noun phrase, predicate noun, because that's what follows the verb be in this case. And there's no other noun immediately after 76. I mean, we do see week here, but this seems like a separate constituent, right? If I say, my granddad will be 76 next week, and you don't hear me, and you say, when will your granddad be 76? Oh, next week is the answer. So again, because that can function as its own constituent, we don't really analyze it with 76. There's no noun immediately following that. So that has to be the noun itself. So here's some practice with numbers. We have 76 trombones led the big parade. My granddad will be 76 next week. And the Leaning Tower of Pisa has been leaning since its construction in the 12th century. Now, we may have seen that sentence earlier. Actually, it was almost exactly the same sentence in one of the previous slides. The only difference is I changed 1173, the year, to the 12th century. Okay, so our last type of determiner is prearticles. Now, these are words that can precede articles or possessive, and they include quantifiers, partitives, multipliers, and fractions. So prearticles tell us how much of or what portion of something is being specified. Oops, I forgot to take the page number off there. So, for example, let's look at multipliers. We visit twice each month. Twice, in this case, is a multiplier, and it tells us how often we visit. Now, in this case, we're going to label this as a prearticle. We also have of, and this appears with a lot of prearticles. We're going to analyze that as a unit with the preceding prearticle and not with the noun that follows it. So I can say a jar of sugar and not a jar of sugar. Okay. So a jar of sugar specifies a measurement. So prearticles are often measurements. A cup of, a jar of, a tablespoon of, 3/4 of. Notice that of follows a lot of these measurements and fractions. And we're going to keep of as a constituent with the preceding prearticle as we have here, okay, or the preceding noun, not with the noun that follows it. So we're going to practice how to do all of these in your trees a little bit later. But for just a practice sentence, you want to try to do as much as you can on this sentence here. I would like a cup of the decaf coffee. Okay. All right. So we have lots and lots of trees to start and lots to do on Friday. Thanks very much. Have a great day.